afternoon. My name is Dave Norton from Discovering New England History. And we're going to continue with the Clara Barton Civil War story. And this is going to be part 3. It's a part of history that a lot of folks have never really got into detail of Clara Barton. They think of her primarily as just the founder of the Red Cross, and that was it. So we're going to correct a little history here. So we'll go to the next slide. Now, we're going to go to the next battle on the Rappahannock River down in Fredericksburg, Virginia, 1862. And the Union Army is right here, basically where we're standing and looking across the river. And the Southern Army was on the other side of the river. This is in 1862. We'll go to the next slide. And I'll read from this. This is actually from Lieutenant Peter Hunt from Seekonk in one of his letters here, but it describes Fredericksburg a little bit. November 23rd, 1862. There are just across the river in our front 50,000 Secesh. And of course, Secesh is what they call the secessionists, because the South seceded from the Union. Burnside has several batteries hid in the woods upon the hills with orders to shell the town at the first shot. And there's a picture there on the hills there with all the artillery ready just for the command for General Burnside to start the battle. And we'll go to the next slide. Now, they had to put these pontoon bridges across the river so they could get the army and the horses and the cannons and everything across there. And this is probably one of the better paintings I've ever seen. And that group there that volunteered to do this, you got to remember, Confederate sharpshooters were on the other side of the river there, and believe me, they were good. So they had the engineers trying to assemble this. And the group that volunteered was actually from Massachusetts. And they took a heavy beating. They tried 3 or 4 times to get this pontoon bridge, and the sharpshooters were picking them off. You can see that one at a time. Very, very dangerous here because they wanted to attack across the river. And we'll go to the next slide. And once they got across the river and they took the town, up on the hill were all the Confederate batteries, all the artillery, Marie's Heights. And they were just waiting for the Union to advance. And you go to the next slide. And this is what they did. I mean, they advanced in formation, a long line, and charged right up that hill. And you can imagine, we're talking thousands of soldiers in the Union Army, and they figured they could just go, once they got across the Rappahannock River, they could charge up the hill. And what had happened was, it took such a delay to put the pontoon bridges across, and actually to wait for the pontoon bridges, that the Southern Army was able to regroup and send a lot more soldiers across than the Union or Burnside anticipated. So we'll go to the next slide. And they were all behind a stone wall, the Confederates. This stone wall, when I went to Fredericksburg, it's probably a quarter of a mile long. Unbelievable. And they just poured fire down on the advancing Union. And we'll go to the next slide. And so the attack came in, and it absolutely got crushed. But General Burnside was determined to take that position. So the Union Army regrouped and attacked again. They attacked over 4 times in 2 days, and the casualties were enormous. We'll go to the next slide. Now, what they had to do was have a ceasefire and pull the bodies off. And what they did is they took them across the Rappahannock River for medical aid. And you can see this is a Union Field Hospital, Fredericksburg, Virginia. And you can see as far as you could see, soldiers were just thrown down there, and doctors and nurses were trying the best to stop the bleeding and help everyone. We'll go to the next slide. And this was actually what they call the Lacey House. They turned it into a hospital. It was across the other side of the river, Fredericksburg, Virginia. And that's an actual picture of what it was. You can see the Union soldiers there. And of course, the whole grounds were not just a hospital, the whole grounds were just filled with soldiers, wounded soldiers. You go to the next slide. And this is the site you had looking across from the Lacey House. Now, Clara Barton, when they first tried to get across the river, she saw all these soldiers were getting picked off and shot, and they're just lying there on the on the riverbank and laying there on the incompleted bridge. And she was compelled to do something, so she actually rushed down from Lacey House right onto the pontoon bridge. She actually held a soldier and was trying to get him off the bridge. And a Confederate sharpshooter took a shot, and it went right through the sleeve on her dress, killed a soldier right beside her. So she had incredible courage and fortitude. It's just unbelievable. I mean, everybody was, what's that nurse doing down there? And that's what she was doing. And finally, she went back to the Lacey House because she was just overwhelmed with all the soldiers coming back there. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is a picture of Clara Barton, tirelessly, unbelievable, aiding to the wounded. I mean, she set up all these cooking pots and gave them warm stew. She changed all the bandages. She went from person to person. And you can see that's a Lacey House there. And you can see this is the shot now. And of course, the main attack was across the river there, and you can just see the silhouette of the town of Fredericksburg. And you can imagine all the wounded that she had to try to care for and manage. We'll go to the next slide. Now we have another letter here from Peter Hunt. I'll read this one here. And that's an actual picture during the Civil War of the Lacey House. You can see the covered wagon there, probably bringing medical supplies that Clara Barton ordered. Okay. Yesterday, one of our battery men swam the river. It is quite common for the pickets to exchange papers and swim the river. One of the rebels came over near the Lacey House on a board bringing papers in his hat. And these are newspapers because the soldiers always like to know the news on both sides. Our pickets filled his hat with coffee and sugar. He put it on and swam back. So Lieutenant Peter Hunt from Seekonk was in the gun position right across from near the Lacey House. And here's an actual letter that he sent back to his folks back here in New England. We'll go to the next slide. There's another shot of the Lacey House backyard. Of course, there's Clara Barton right there, and you can see they had, I guess looks like they were assembling some pine boxes or whatever to bury the dead. It was a horrendous battle. And of course, it was a big Southern victory. The South won on this one here, and Burnside was crushed. We'll go to the next slide. And this is a shot. They recently colorized it, and I took a close look at that. And I said, wait a minute, this is the side of the Lacey House. You can see all the brick, whatever, on one side. And I circled in red this nurse in the green dress. And lo and behold, if I'm not mistaken, that's a picture of Clara Barton there. And those are the soldiers just, they probably just had legs and arms amputated, whatever, and they're just resting out there in the sun. And she's probably taking a well-deserved break. We'll go to the next slide. And of course, that's a copy of the saw that they used to saw off limbs. There's another picture, the Lacey House, of the amputees resting after surgery. And multiply that by thousands. We'll go to the next slide. And this is today. That's the Lacey House over there on the left. And of course, there it is, what it looked like during the Civil War on the right. So it's still there, and actually you could visit it. I think it's turned into a museum. Important part of history. That's where Clara Barton aided all the soldiers, and on that side of the river was Peter Hunt and his artillery. Now we'll go to the next slide. Now she was really getting into supplies and things, because she knew you have doctors and nurses, but gee, if they don't have all the medical supplies and they don't have any food and they don't have all the things like that, they can't handle waves and waves of wounded soldiers. So she was a great organizer, and this is a great picture here. It shows the medical supplies, and it would come in by rail. Then they would offload the rail cars, put them into covered wagons, and then take them to the front. And she was the one that initiated all of this. And one of the stories was really interesting. Nighttime was coming along, and all of a sudden she went into one of the rooms, and all they had was one candle. And the surgeon, the doctor, was down there. He just collapsed from exhaustion, and he was just so distraught, because he says, "I can't go on. I can't see what I'm doing." And so Clara said, "I have something for you in the wagons." And he looked at her. What could it possibly be? How could she know what we need here? She says, "I have a wagon outside. I've got 24 kerosene lanterns, and I can bring them in for you." Well, I'm telling you, it said that he couldn't believe it. So we called through the angel on the battlefield. He couldn't believe it. They lit every room in that house, and that's because of Clara Barton. She had the foresight to figure what the soldiers, what they actually needed in terms of times of crisis. That's an amazing story. So we'll go to the next slide. Now, Abraham Lincoln, President Lincoln, he saw everything that she was doing, and she just did it. I mean, just took charge and everything else. So he placed her in charge of the Union Army, of all the hospitals. And that's what she wanted to do, and she said, "Thank you very much." And she continued on and got better and better with each battle, exactly how they responded. And we'll go to the next slide. Now, so she's managing the hospital, so she's really not getting that close to the battle. And, of course, the Civil War ended when Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, April 1865. And we'll go to the next slide. And then a few days later, Abe Lincoln was shot and killed April 14th, 1865, Ford's Theater. And we'll go to the next slide. And Clara, what she did was, she started in Washington, D.C., what they call the Missing Soldiers Office, 1865. And she says, someone's got to write to all the families if we've discovered exactly where their son or whatever was killed on the battlefield, so they'll know what the circumstances is, and the families need to know that. So she's established all of this, and they gave her a few clerks, and they wrote over 41,000 individual letters all over the United States telling them their son has died, and this is what happened, and this is the battle, all personally handwritten letters. She was in charge of that. No one had ever done that before. Now, a fellow by Dorrance Atwater from Terryville, Connecticut, over on the right, he's a survivor of Andersonville. And he was trying, when he was at Andersonville, he kept the head of the Confederates there, the prison, had him because he was a great clerk, great penmanship, keep every day a list of all the dead as they died at Andersonville. Ended up with over 12,000 soldiers died at Andersonville down in Georgia. And under penalty of death, if he was caught, Dorrance Atwater kept a duplicate list, and he would sew it in his jacket at the end of the day and then go back into the camp. He kept that list. And the war is over. He smuggled it out from the Confederacy, and he kept it. And now the Union Army, they wanted that because the war is over. they wanted that destroyed. They wanted to have that letter destroyed because they wanted to seal the wounds of the Civil War. And he felt it should be publicized in the paper because the families would not know the fate of these 12,000 soldiers. So he was really getting frustrated trying to do that. Found out about Clara Barton, wrote her a letter. They agreed to meet right here in Washington, D.C. He showed her the letter, and she said, oh my gosh, because she's had this effort of the missing soldiers office. And he told her the problem he had trying to get it published and whatever, and so she decided to help him out. We'll go to the next slide. And this is how they did it in Andersonville, these long trenches, and they just put the soldiers in shoulder to shoulder and then filled it in. And his letter was, with all their list of the dead was kept for history. We'll go to the next slide. And that's part of it. Of course, many pages, you can imagine. Lists the number of the burial, it lists the soldier's name, it lists all the information that, the day he died, all that information. But Clara Barton went to Edwin Stanton, who was the Secretary of War. Of course, the administration was all mixed up here after Lincoln died and whatever, and she wanted to do something about this. She wanted to check this list out. She wanted to perhaps even go down to Andersonville and put markers on for all these soldiers. So we'll go to the next slide. So what they did is they gave her a Union group of 40 soldiers. They made up, for starters, 7,000 grave markers, wooden grave markers with all these numbers on it that Lawrence Atwater had. And they gave her the mission to go from Washington, D.C., and the first stop would be Savannah, Georgia. In order to get down there, it was by steamboat, and there's a picture of the steamboat right there. It took them 4 days to do that, July 8th to 12th, 1865. So they loaded up all these markers and everything, and they started on the steamboat south. But the commander of the Union Army did not want to have a Clara Barton, because she's a woman, did not want to take any orders from her. And he did everything he could to prevent her successful mission. We'll go to the next slide. Now, after those 4 days, they landed in Savannah, Georgia, but they had to stay there 1 week. And they didn't know if the mission, of course, the officer in charge of the 40 men, he did everything he could to cancel this whole operation. And she says, no, it's not going to happen. And so she had contacts in Washington, D.C. And what happened was one of the railroad lines on the journey to Andersonville Prison was completely damaged during the Civil War when Sherman marched from Atlanta to Savannah. And they didn't think, they thought it was repaired, but it really wasn't. So they were stuck here in Savannah for a week. And we'll go to the next slide. So she would not give up. So the U.S. government accepted her Plan B, and the way they're going to have to do it. If you take a look at, there's a picture of Georgia, and these are all the cities that were going to trace this whole journey that she took. And you can see the green line right there, going from Savannah across to Macon. That was the line that was completely ripped up by Sherman's march to the sea. So she came up with a plan. Let's go north to Augusta, then by steamboat. Let's take a train from Augusta all the way to Atlanta, then take another train south from Atlanta to Macon, Georgia. Switch trains, and then take a train all the way down to Andersonville. And they accepted her plan. That whole route now obviously was way out of their way, and it took 460 miles. And you got to remember, this was in August, over 100-degree temperatures on rail and train, no air conditioning or anything. And every step of the way, this Union officer in charge of the 40 men was doing everything he could to sabotage her assignment. Matter of fact, he told the fellow on the ship they were going to take, steamboat they're going to take up the river. He says, "Okay, when we leave here early in the morning, we're going to leave at a certain time, and if Clara Barton is not here, we're going to leave without her." And that's the type of thing she had to fight. I mean, tremendous fortitude. We'll go to the next slide. And that shows Sherman. It's what happened during the Civil War. And that's what happened. You can see him ripping up all the railroad lines all the way down to Savannah. And we'll go to the next slide. Now, here's the steamer. And they're going to take it now. They had to go up the Savannah River to Augusta. It took them 2 days to do that, July 19th to the 20th, 1865. Now, you had to have these large either steamer ships or train because all the supply, they had all their tools, and they had 7,000 grave markers. I mean, you can't take that in covered wagons, 460 miles. And so that was very difficult, but she's the one that would not give up and just pushed everybody forward on this mission. So we'll go to the next slide. Then they finally got up to what they call the Augusta House. I found this great picture, Civil War, the Augusta House in Georgia. Now you got 40 people. Once again, she's the only woman here in this whole thing. Now you're down in the middle of the South. The Civil War was just over. You've got to figure how you're going to get to Andersonville. And you've got a Union officer who's fighting her every single step of the way. So they stayed here overnight at this Augusta House. That's an actual picture of it. And we'll go to the next slide. So after a couple of days, this is a picture of the actual Augusta train depot. So they got a train that's going to head north. They had to load all their supplies on it and head north towards Atlanta. So we'll go to the next picture. And there's the same railroad station. You can see the locomotive there, all loaded up here. And it took them 2 days to go from Augusta to Atlanta because they still had problems with the railroad tracks being not repaired. We'll go to the next slide. Now, once again, you can see the map here, starting at Savannah, and then, of course, they follow the arrows, the Savannah River up to Augusta, and now that was a horrendous trip there from Augusta all the way to Atlanta. It said it was so hot in there, and the trains were used by the Confederate Army, certainly during the Civil War, and there were all these holes in the ceiling of the cars that she was on. And the conductor was actually in the Confederate Army at the time, and now he's not. So he was doing everything he could to slow this whole thing down. But all these holes in the roof, they said all the Confederate soldiers would take their bayonets and take their swords, and they were punching holes for ventilation through the roof of all these cars. So there they were, chugging across there. And the train would only go 12 miles an hour. Had frequent stops for holes, and all our holes were in the ceiling for ventilation. They had to get frequent stops. It was quite a journey, but she was determined to get to Andersonville. And we'll go to the next slide. You can see what they're up against. Augusta to Atlanta, going through these tough turns and everything else, carrying everything here. It's a great shot. We'll go to the next slide. Now they had a pause here, waiting for track repairs. You can see the track repairs over on the right. So it took them 2 days to get to Atlanta. We'll go to the next slide. And that's what they found. Atlanta was in ruins when General Sherman went through. And we'll go to the next slide. There's the Atlanta Iron Works. You can actually see the cannonball. The whole place was burned to the ground, torched. The devastation was amazing. Well, the next slide. Now, they had a rest over to stay at Confederate General John Bell Hood. That was his headquarters. And, of course, the war was over and they captured it. So they stayed there to rest over. And that was in Atlanta, Georgia. And that's a picture of it. That's the actual Hood House. Or they actually call the Bell House. And we'll go to the next slide. Now, they want to take a train from Atlanta to Macon. This time the rails were complete, and they came right down to Macon. You can see on the map, the arrows are pointing down here. And we'll go to the next slide. There they are, waiting for the next train from Atlanta to Macon. And I'll go to the next slide. And then they took another train, and they went from Macon to Andersonville. There's your train route, and there's Andersonville, way in the middle of nowhere in Georgia. What a trip. We'll go to the next slide. Now the train leaves Macon for Andersonville. There's a picture of the where they had a transfer. It took another day, loading all the supplies, all the tools. And we'll go to the next slide. They finally reach Andersonville Depot, where the notorious Confederate prisoner of war camp is. It took them 17 days from Washington, D.C. to get there in the middle of the hot summer. The total trip was, I think, over 460 miles. And they finally got there. And they had to unload the train. And we're going to continue with episode 4 on this journey, which I don't think anybody has ever recorded this journey in terms of photos and pictures like that. And what Clara Barton had to do with everything was against her. Everything was against her. The rails were against her. The lieutenant in charge of the men were against her. And she was the only woman there, and she persevered. So once again, this is Dave Norton, Discovering New England History. Have a good evening.